Meanwhile, we've cut off our connection to the great mother, or just look at it like it's not important whatsoever, and that's not to say that we have to live purely like cavemen, but certainly have reverence for the earth and continue to progress ourselves in technology to where we can live a more harmonious balance with her, because this is a cradle of life. And if you light your cradle on fire, there's no cradle to sleep in. And that's just how it goes.
And that to me is just indicative of how absent our sense of self is, because at this point of ecological disaster, the survival instinct should have kicked in. We should be trying to save ourselves. Like, that we're not, that we're still choosing greed and this sort of Faustian bargain for more progress, more knowledge, more, deal with the devil, tells me that there's no there in most beings now. Like, that connection to self, which is the mother archetype, right? That is the mother complex, how you relate to yourself, how you take care of your own physical needs, and the cycle of life and death in which you are a part is your mother, not your actual mother, your inner mother. That we don't have an awareness of that has kicked in to save our asses at this point is it's hatred of the mother. Like, I'm sure that on a very, very deep level, this is just deep hatred of the feminine. And B, like, it's such a rationalization, it's such a heady thing, it's such a masculine thing to have no body instinct, to have no survival instinct. It's absurd. And yeah, just like I said, very indicative of how far, how huge that chasm is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we also operate out of a origin point of really pure pessimism. I think that that's why things like Western reductionism and psychologists like Freud are so big in our society, because it's a positive feedback loop that creates negativity. So you operate out of a baseline of pessimism before you even begin to make decisions, because of how we're brought up as a culture, and how we're taught from parents, public schools, whatever the case is that you automatically assume the worst in people, or the worst in humanity, the worst in nature, whatever the case is, before ever actually giving anything a chance. And I think that that's it. It's so detrimental.
I mean, there's two things in that, right? There's the projection of the shadow. I can't tolerate the worst in myself, so I must see it in others. And that is a fundamental 1-to-1 ratio, that if I cannot contain or tolerate something about myself, I see it in the mirror of reality as an other.
I really started to try to fix within myself is operating on that baseline of pessimism. That's why I think that when I mentioned earlier that I thought when I was reading Carl Jung, I was reading less about psychology and more about metaphysics, is because it just seemed like it was giving you a baseline to look at the world out of such a more optimistic view, that you can create, again, like I was saying, empathy for yourself, but just a baseline of optimism to look at yourself that in turn projects out onto the world. That's so much healthier to operate out of. If you just give people the benefit of the doubt, most of the time they're probably going to live up to your expectations. I found that most of the time when I give people the benefit of the doubt, they might be a little surprised at first. Like, say, if you're giving trust to a stranger or something, they might be a little taken back because they're not used to that. But more often than not, they're going to actually fulfill the idea of optimism that you have in mind.
Well, see, so there's something back to this idea of mother and kind of the cultural mother or inner mother. The very first developmental task that we have is to develop basic trust with our caregiver. And in the absence of a space in which that's available to us, we go into fear. My needs will never be met. This will never work out. So basic trust and what you're deeming pessimism, these are like fundamental, 0 to 6 months old developmental tasks. So if we're in an environment that already on the unconscious level is steeped in that anxiety, that fear of life, that mistrust, even if you have a lovely relationship to your primary caregiver, you're picking up on all of the unspoken stuff. You're picking up on the culture. You're picking up on mistrust. So it's very, very hard to actually get that basic task met. And I see this so often with clients and so often in journey work, that you have to regress to that place when the trust was wounded, and actually kind of return to that with adult consciousness and form different experiences, form different neural connections that show you, oh, I can trust. And it's not that you're trusting a stranger now necessarily, it's that you're trusting the life inside of them. That's the trust that we're talking about. It's not an individual. It's the thing inside you that makes you alive. That's what I want to trust. And that's the mother, right? It's life. If I can trust her in her movement through me, in her movement through the world, and I have a strong intuition because I trust her, then I'm safe. I don't need to go into that fear response, that pessimism, that mistrust, because I'm good. I've got my homing device, right? The other thing that I wanted to say, I did remember it. You said something about leaving things up to chance. And I think, Peterson writes a lot about chaos and order as a fundamental polarity. He's obviously not the first one, but that's another way of talking about masculine, feminine, right? And when we put our trust in the feminine, there is a high degree of chaos, of chance, of like, whatever will be, will be. Like, time will tell, right? And when we project onto chaos that it's disordered and negatively unpredictable, or unpredictability becomes a negative thing, uncontrollable, too wild. I mean, all of these things are true about chaos, but when there's this projection that then makes it evil, that then makes it wrong, this fear of the feminine or the hatred of mother, or whatever, however we want to talk about it, then I can't actually be in that trusting place of like, the chaos will provide. And that's what synchronicity is, right? That the meaningful things will find me, because that's what meaning is. That's what the co-emergence and the acausal relationship of matter, mother, is that, all right, yeah, chaos principle. The right shit's going to come at the right time. And I can trust that even if I don't see it now with my rational order, my logic, my lists, my plans. And there's nothing wrong with plans. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with goal setting or logic or ordering one's life. But when we become one-sided in that, so much so that we fear and reject the other side, then it is really impossible to kind of trust in chance and trust in the rightness of life, that the right things will happen at the right time. That's a big leap for the like order only kind of mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. The spontaneity of life is, it's beautiful. It's like when I tell people that I believe in the divine or the cosmos, or I talk about God, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that there's a flow of life, a masculine and feminine flow throughout our universe that you can tap into and it's going to provide. It is, like you were saying, it's that synchronicity. It's giving up control to a degree and putting faith in something that you can never prove to exist, and understanding that it is going to provide for you. It might not seem like it's going to be in a positive manner at some points. There are going to be points in your life where you might think that you're in hell. I'm sure you've definitely experienced it. I've experienced it. Anyone I think that has gone through this journey has experienced it. And more often than not, you're going to come out of that if you take the opportunity to harness what it's telling you and do the work to put your life back on a correct path forward, a correct, you're going to be so much better in the long run than if you shut yourself off to those possibilities and to what the cosmos is telling you, to what that feminine energy, that chaos is trying to bring into your life. I like the analogies of the universe is feminine and the earth is feminine, and then humanity as being the masculine, because we bring a certain level of order to our perceived reality, our plane of existence, so that we can operate in a more comfortable manner and interact with each other. But that does not mean that we have control over life. If anything, it is far from that. We have absolutely zero control. We are on a floating rock hurtling through space at whatever many miles an hour, and at any second a comet could hit us and completely wipe us out. And that's if we don't kill each other first. If that's not chaos, then I don't know what is. And it's like you accept that, you give yourself into that, and you understand that things are going to work out. Things are going to work out as long as you receive what the universe is giving you, and then you try to operate out of a place of positivity. Then you're eventually going to be in a better place, I think.
Yes, and like the urge to alleviate suffering while in the midst of it, I think that that's a pretty misguided urge. Obviously, it's very animal to lean towards pleasure and avoid pain. But as anybody who's been in an ayahuasca experience knows, got to go through the portal of pain. And the pain is what cleanses you. That is what you purge when you're in that space. You're not purging after ecstasis. You're purging because here's my history of addiction, or here's my trauma, or here's my deep fear. That's what gets cleansed. So it's these experiences of pain that like clean the slate, and to try and avoid them means being toxified by them. And it's no small task. I work with clients a lot on this relationship. What's your relationship to chaos and order? Because what we project on these invisible but very, very influential things is so telling. If I fear all chaos and over ascribe to order, okay, then we've got OCD, we've got anxiety disorders, we've got panic disorder, right? If I'm actually quite at home in the chaos and I tend to put negative projections on the order, all right, so we've got depression, we've got bipolar, we've got ADHD, right? So the psyches form based on these projections, and you can't alleviate those symptoms fundamentally without the person understanding, oh, I need to take a stance and understand my relationship to these archetypal energies. I need to understand what I have come to know about chaos, and is that actually true? Is she actually this wild beast that's going to devour me? Nope, that's my projection. Okay, interesting. Maybe I can relate to her in a new way now. There's a Camille Paglia. I'm a huge fan of her, and that loses me a lot of points in feminist circles. But to your point of the universe being feminine and humans being masculine, and Neumann writes about this too, that the development of ego consciousness is masculine and the instinctual body is feminine, right? And that we contain both of these poles. But Paglia makes this really wonderful point that I turn over in my mind at least once a day. She talks about how society is built on vision, that literal vision, like the seeing of aesthetic. So now we're shaping nature to make it more appealing to us. we're shaping our bodies and our ways of being. We're shaping hierarchical structures and buildings and works of art based on an aesthetic that's vision based, right? And again, this is both eyesight and also just like vision, like the visionary being and the ability to see in a linear way forward. And that there's something inherently masculine about that taking the raw material and shaping it, shaping the natural world into something that fits more into society, shaping human instincts and human social dynamics, which are totally chaotic, into a hierarchical structure called society. So there is something very masculine about this kind of architect energy and the vision, especially. And the reason that I bring it to the eyes is because I think that there's this very, very cool thing that if we tap into that on an individual level, like what I'm doing when I'm looking at something versus what I'm doing when I'm feeling something inside. And that's exactly the dichotomy that we're talking about here. And most people are going to be dominant in one, that I rely more on what I can see and therefore what I know and how I'm shaping versus, okay, I'm not really paying attention to the details of the space around me or the features on the person, but I do have a felt sense of them. Or I do know what the vibe is. I know what this atmosphere feels like, right? So that's an inner experience. And it's not so much about then creating based on a vision. It's like moving through things from a feeling. And again, like masculine, feminine, right? Like the orientation to life is entirely broken down into these two ways of being. And we can be pathologized, or we can have pathology and symptoms in either direction.